A whisker pole is used to hold out the headsail on a sailboat when sailing downwind. In this video, I'll show how I made this wooden whisker pole using a Birdsmouth construction technique where 8 staves are glued together, creating a hollow spar to reduce weight. I started with a rough-sawn pine board that was previously milled from a tree in my backyard. This board measures 1.5 inches thick, 8 inches wide, and 16 feet long. One edge of the board is straightened with hand planes. First with a number 4 smoothing plane, followed with a longer number 7 jointing plane. Next, the board is run through the planer to flatten and reduce the thickness of the board. My extension tables come in handy when working with long boards. After several passes, the board is brought down to a final thickness of 1¼ inches. I'll rip the board into 5/8 inch strips, or staves, with my radial arm saw. My extra long fence helps me control and align this long board during the ripping operation. A sacrificial pushboard is used to move the stave and cutoff safely past the saw blade. The board contained a few knots that must be cut out and rejoined with scarf joints. The acute angles needed for the scarf joints are easily cut with the radial arm saw by placing the staves against an auxiliary fence. The scarves can now be glued together. After all the knots have been removed, the staves are run through the planer together to make sure they are all of uniform size. There are several tools that could be used to cut the Birdsmouth profile in the staves, but I've chosen to use a molding head on my radial arm saw, fitted with 90-degree flute knives. I align the point of the knife with the top of the stave and then lower it 3/16 of an inch, equivalent to lowering the column on the saw 1.5 turns. I use my micro adjuster to control the depth of cut. You don't want to remove too much material at one time. I make multiple passes on the staves, slowly bringing the blade in until I reach my 7/16 inch cut. The molding head works well, cutting the desired Birdsmouth profile in the edge of the staves. I make a clean cut at the end of the staves, then clamp them together to cut all to final length. I want the whisker pole to be tapered from about 3 inches in diameter at the center to about 1 3/4 inches at the ends. To do this, the width of the staves are tapered from 1 1/4 inches to 3/4 of an inch. I made a long taper jig to securely clamp and consistently cut the staves at the required angle. A screw serves as an end stop. Once the blade position is set, the taper jig is pushed along the rip fence. To taper the other end of the staves, the jig is reconfigured and the radial arm saw is changed to the outrip configuration so the staves can be cut in the opposite direction. The staves are glued together with a marine-grade epoxy. This is definitely a multi-person job to get the glue applied and the staves assembled in a timely manner. Wire ties were used to hold the assembly together until the glue dried. I will plug the ends with dowels. I start with a step drill to drill a round hole. This was followed by a Forstner bit. Finally, a spade bit and extension was used to obtain the required hole depth. Two edges were left unglued and covered with packing tape so the pole could be separated into two halves. This allowed me to protect the interior of the pole with a penetrating epoxy. Some fine-tuning to ensure the dowel end plugs fit well. I also made an octagon-shaped plug to be glued in the center of the pole to add additional strength and stiffness. The two halves are now made ready for the final glue up. Hose clamps and wire ties are used to clamp the assembly together. The next step is to turn this octagon shape into a round pole. A hand plane is used to remove the edges and shape the pole. I made sanding blocks from floor sanding belts. These did a great job with the final shaping and smoothing process. The ends are shaped with a belt sander to fit the bronze end hardware. The pole is now ready for finish. I'm applying multiple coats of a marine wood varnish. The bronze hardware did not have pre-drilled mounting holes, so I needed to drill and countersink for screws. I use a Vicks bit to center the holes, which is followed up with a longer bit to drill the pilot holes. The hardware is attached with silicone bronze screws. And here's my completed wooden whisker pole. It looks and works fantastic. I hope you found this project interesting. Thanks for watching.